You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, and well, here we are again. You're listening to episode number 219 of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. And I'm Steve Adams, the guy who had that midlife crisis 6 years ago when I hiked the Appalachian Trail for the very first hike of my life. 5 million steps later, I was screaming at the world from the top of that weathered, battered brown sign at the top of Katahdin. Each week we try to bring you guests who have or want to have that same elated feeling on that very same sign. This week, after an email from a listener, I cast the net really wide and snagged a great interview with two fellow members of mine of the class of 2019, even though we never met. Natalie Wood and Grady Thompson, or Togs and Lucky, met on the trail and have been together ever since. I caught up with them last week and we had a really fun conversation from a long way apart. Togs and Lucky will be along in a minute. Kate Stillwell hadn't called me since we spoke a week ago, but fortunately I heard from her on Tuesday evening and she'll be sharing her 2020 hike with you all after Togs and Lucky. Finally, Grandma Gatewood continues to trade on the goodwill of the people she meets and the fame she's accumulating. By the way, I'm nearing the end of this book and I've reached out to another author for permission to read his next. If I don't get that permission, please send me your suggestions and I'll try to get permission to read your choice. So let's get on with it. I've got to warn you, we had a few technical difficulties on this one and we're even cut off for a while, but we worked it out in the end. The only bad thing is that my sound isn't so great, though happily Togs and Lucky do most of the talking and they sound terrific. Here are Natalie Wood and Grady Thompson. I'd like to introduce you all to a young woman and a young man. I'm speaking with them on Tuesday evening at around 5 p.m. in Florida, where they are 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, which always throws me. This is Natalie Wood, or Togs, and Grady Thompson, or Lucky. Hi, guys. Top of the morning to you.
Hello.
And so tell us where you are. You're in another day, so you're a day ahead of me.
We're in Brisbane, Australia right now, and we're currently locked up in a hotel room, having spent the last 12 days in quarantine, which is an Australian government mandated procedure if you travel from overseas. So
we feel fine, by the way.
Right, yeah. Thank God for that. Yeah, I hope I don't catch anything over the airways. So does everybody have to go into quarantine when they go to Australia?
Everyone.
Anyone who travels overseas, from overseas.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So they've got quite an amazing procedure going on where we get off the plane and we get shuttled to a hotel and we get put in a hotel room and they feed us 3 times a day and we don't see anyone
for 2 weeks. Not too bad.
Wow, how bad is that? Yeah, it's not too bad.
Beautiful view of the city, and we're not complaining, but we'll be happy to get out of here for sure.
I bet you will. So you haven't been able to get out that room at all?
No,
not yet.
Oh my God! And you're still getting on well with each other. You're even sharing.
I know.
Even sharing headphones.
No.
This is nothing compared to the trail.
You're absolutely right. Now, to internationalize this even more, and you can probably hear this, Grady's American while Natalie is British. So how do you end up in Oz? What are you doing there?
Well, I've been living in Australia for about 8 years. And so I went to America for the trail, and then I went back to America, where I've been living with Lucky, and the two of us have come back to Australia now.
This is my first time in Australia.
Yeah, first time for Lucky in Australia, and so I.
How are you enjoying it so far?
It's absolutely lovely to look at.
Yeah. So you worked in Australia, did you? Or you work in Australia?
Yeah, so I've been working in Australia for about 8 years as a dentist, and so I've come back. Actually, we don't have jobs or houses or cars right now, so we've really thrown ourselves in it. But It seemed like the right place to be at this time with
we have
with
friends
the world
to stay with, and
world a bit crazy right now. So we thought let's get back to Australia.
Nice.
We'll figure it out from here. They're easing their restrictions a little bit at a time, and I think things are looking good here. No new coronavirus cases in Queensland yesterday or today.
All right. That's quite something. It really is. Now, the two of you met on the trail last year and you hiked with a bunch of people, one of whom was a listener, a guy called John Van Etten, or
Catmando.
Well, John reached out to me and suggested I should chat with you. Now, something you don't know, I asked John if he had any questions for you.
Let's see what Cat
look at your faces. Yeah, well, I'm going to say those to the end. They sound very interesting to me. But we'll do that at the end. So how did the two of you end up hiking the Appalachian Trail? You go first then, Lucky.
So I started with Catmando on February 17th, but the journey to the trail took quite a long time. I decided in a control room in Baghdad that I wanted to have a few months of hiking in green and wet. And I certainly got them. But that was as soon as I left the military, my plan was to hike the Appalachian Trail as kind of a transition to the next part of my life.
Happens to a lot of military people. Did you meet many military people out there?
There was definitely a few. One of them was in our tramily, Farmer. He was in the Army for a good number of years, and he was out there hiking as well.
And why does the military like to go out there? What do you think it is about the trail that is an attraction to the military?
For most, I think I can speak for a good number of the people that come out of the military and hike the trail. Maybe not all of them, but it's a good transition. It's going from military life, which can be a little bit different from normal life, but it's a regimented life, and you go from that regimented life to having the ultimate freedom of doing whatever you want. So a lot of people would think of the trail as both a challenge and a transition. It's also regimented. You get up, you eat breakfast, you hike, you eat, you hike, you eat, you sleep. And then it's also a bit of, I'd say, a time for you to relax, for your mind to relax. And the trail is therapeutic in a way for a lot of people. So they're able to use the trail, which is a regimented thing to do after the military, but it's also very, very amazing. I mean, for all the reasons the trail is amazing, it's I think helpful for a lot of transitioning military service members.
And don't forget that you were able to grow a beard.
It's also nice to be able to grow out my hair. My hair was not this long, and my beard was not this long.
Yeah, the man bun and the beard wouldn't really work in the military, would it?
No, this is rebellion.
yeah. So, did you find it? I don't know whether therapeutic is the word necessarily, but maybe it is. Did you find it was good for your soul to have done this without the stories, but in terms of how you felt as a result of having come out of the military? Did you feel it was a good transition for you?
I think it was a perfect transition. I've always been drawn to the outdoors, and my favorite things to do have always been with nature and in nature. So it was the natural transition for me to feel almost at home on the trail, rather than because I was living in Southern California in the desert for a number of years with the military, and then going overseas to the desert. It was desert to desert. I really never had much time off from that. So going back to the forest and being able to hike, I think that was good for my mental health, but it also was where I belong, I guess.
Cool. How nice. What about you, Natalie? How did you get to the trail? But from being a dentist in Australia, because I know, and you did remind me when we spoke before that you did actually contact me, didn't you? And I'm going to mention this now, actually, and I'm going to put a link in the show notes. You wrote to me, I think, and you told me you'd done a video, or somebody sent me the video, and there's a 26-minute video of the trail. And it's all in verse. Oh my God. I couldn't write a verse for 1 minute. Yours is 26 or 28 minutes long.
I missed my calling as Dr. Zeus.
She knocked it out in about 2 weeks. She knocked out that whole video.
That was extraordinary. But perhaps we'll talk about that again later. But how did you get to the trail? What was your journey then to get there?
Yeah, so I was just muddling through life. I wasn't in a bad place in my life at all, but I was in a position where I was looking around myself going, oh, is this it? You know, like I'm
looking at people's teeth. Yeah, I can understand that.
I'm in this, every day I'm in this sterile environment, and I'm thinking, I love being mucky. Like, why am I so clean all the time? So I don't know. There was this, I had sort of a thought about doing doing an adventure. I'd done a couple of things in my life in previous years that had been like kind of, endurance events, like some long ocean swims, and I'd really thrived on, the training for them and the event themselves. And actually I finished a long ocean swim over in Rottnest Island. And at the end of it,
how far's a long ocean swim? Sorry,
it was 19.6 kilometers.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
About 12 and a half miles, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. So it took me about 5.5 hours to swim. And it's in white pointer territory. So it's a really famous swim over in Australia. It's the most famous long distance swim. And I completed it. And at the end of it, I think it's like anyone who does like, I've sort of been involved in sport a long time, but I know that feeling of finishing something. And it, like Olympians, they always say like they win the gold medal and it's still almost not enough, and it was like I finished this event after training for 6 months. It was a huge ecstasy at the end of it. And I was like, oh, I need something else. Like this is just not going to be enough for me. So that got me starting to think about what else was out there. I was always reading adventure blogs and things like this. And I think I just read something about someone doing the Triple Crown and I'd never heard of it. And I'm like, what is this? And I began researching and it was a day I read about the AT and I was like, yeah, gonna do it. Well, I actually read about all three and then I started making notes. Which one am I going to do? Very organized way. And so once the seed was planted in my head, I couldn't get away from it. And no matter what I did to try and stop thinking about it, I wanted to do it. And I knew that I had to make it happen. And that's how I ended up on the trail.
So did you quit your job to do that?
I did. Yeah. It was and that was, I think that was probably the hardest part of the whole thing was, knowing you're going to do it. When are you going to tell these jobs? I'd been in the same practice for a long time. I was actually working across 2 practices, loved them. Loved both places that I worked. Very fortunate as a dentist to end up in practices that I really liked, people that I really liked, and patients that I didn't want to let down. But it was just an overriding feeling of what I needed to do for myself. And I took a lot of counsel from people about how to go about it. And it was very stressful for me to leave those jobs because I have like I don't like to upset people and I don't like to disappoint people. And I knew that was going to happen if I left these patients. But I had to do it. And, actually, what it's like everyone says, once you've made a decision and then you follow through with it, then it was easy because I told my bosses and they were fantastic. Absolutely.
Of course they were. And I love that. I met so many people on the trail last year who quit their jobs to be there. And in my generation, which is about 3 generations beyond you, in my generation, we would never have done that. It just wouldn't have been possible. The fact that you've got a great job as a dentist, which is, I presume, a pretty well-paid job in Australia. The fact you quit it to go and poop in the woods. I mean, it's amazing to me that you think that's a good alternative.
Against the advice of people, a lot of my friends and my parents. Well, to be fair, my dad was very supportive from the beginning, and my parents knew my feelings about my job, and so they weren't particularly surprised about me wanting to do something a bit different. But I think it's very, like you say, it's very hard for people who have worked their entire life in possibly the same job, and it's all about hard work and staying in that job. And they're like, you did all those qualifications, you spent years at school, and you're just going to give it all up. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm just going to go away for 6 months. Like, might not be the end of my life, But you're constantly fighting that kind of head over heart situation. And
fighting doubt, feeling like, you have to tell your family, you have to tell your friends and everything that, oh, yeah, I'm going to go hike for 6 months over 2,000 miles. And most people would say, oh, you're crazy,
Yeah. And they'd be right. By the way.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
In a wonderful way, though. But you could always go back, if you wanted to, you could always go back to be a dentist anyway, couldn't you, I presume?
The option is there. We're faced
still qualified.
Still qualified. I wanted, there's part of me being on the trail was to have a think about whether that was the direction I wanted to carry on with. And as I was on the trail, I felt like probably dentistry wasn't for me and that this was the ideal opportunity to take a break from it. However, I came back to Australia after the trail, walked into my old job, who wanted me to work there, was desperate for some money. So I worked for a month and then took a locum job. So I did work as a dentist after the trail. Since been living in the States, again, same feeling, not going to go back to work as a dentist. And we come back in the middle of a global pandemic where having a skill is probably going to be the only way I actually get a job. So the likelihood is I may end up looking at teeth again, but I see it differently now in that, it is a means to be able to, do these things in life that I want to do.
Sure.
But, of course, I want to go and retrain as a park ranger and run around in the woods like everyone who's on the trail does. I
never wanted to do that.
I don't know. I want the funnest job in the world.
You don't see yourself ridge running Shenandoah?
Funny enough, no. Now, I must say, though, and I've thought about this quite a bit recently, as a fellow member of the class of 2019, and I started about a week after you, so there's no possibility I'd ever catch you up. So 2019 was a year in which, of course, had its own difficulties, obviously. I would have hated to have chosen 2020 as my year.
Oh, my God.
All three of us have completed the trail. What would you have done if this year had been your year?
Well, we've actually had several conversations with our tramily, with each other about that. What would you do if, one, it was your year? This was your year. We set our lives aside to go hike the trail. You prepare for months. You do everything you can do. When does the line between your dream and the greater community, where does that line get drawn? Because you hear about trail towns refusing hikers, and until everyone really got off trail this year, trail towns were refusing hikers, and people would refuse service. Stores were closed. Resupply drops would have been messed up. It would have been incredibly difficult. But at the same time, if the directive is everyone stay home, you don't need to be moving on the mountain superhighway town to town, potentially bringing things. In a normal year, you bring norovirus. That's pretty common. But in 2020, it's potentially people who could die from it. So you have to make that decision between yourself, I think.
We've talked about it. We decided that I probably would have left first as a result of a couple of things. Probably one being, as a health professional, I do have that duty of care to the public that I've sworn an oath to. And I think that overrides any kind of personal feelings. And so I think from that point of view, I would have left as a feeling of I should. Also being an international, with all the visa complications, the flight restrictions that were happening, the flight bans that were happening, the border controls that were coming into place, I think whether I would have wanted to or not, my family would have almost insisted that I came home and got off the trail. And I think as devastated as I would be, and I just feel so much for the class of 2020, but I do feel like I would have left, and I do feel that I would have been okay with that decision, knowing that I would have felt like it was the right thing to do. And I think Lucky thought that he would leave at the point when the towns were saying, please don't come in, Because
there are still people through hiking now.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think that makes it more difficult for themselves, and it does put some pressure on the communities. But I think any through hike really could have something similar. If you were hiking the PCT and there was a large section that had a fire, you would be off trail. You would not be able to hike that section. The parks are able to close at their discretion,
And I think with coronavirus as well, I think it's a fairly contentious issue in that people seem to be in either camp. I'm fairly happy to say that I'm in the camp of shut down, get off trail, do the right thing for the public. And I'm behind that. I'm behind that directive. And other people feel differently, and that's okay. People have to do what they think is right. We would have got off. And
everything's a risk assessment.
What would you have done, Steve?
I would almost certainly have got off. Yeah. I'm an older though. I'm 66. I was 66 when I was doing it last year. So if I was doing it this year at 67, I think to myself, I'm more vulnerable than most anyway. So I don't want to get anything. So I would have gone back. But you know what? I don't think you can be prescriptive about this, and too many people take such positions so quickly that they become prescriptive. And I think that's a real sad thing. Now, I'm going to make you both blush now by what Catmando or John Van Etten said about you both. And I'm going to. And there's a reason I'm doing this.
Okay.
He said about Natalie, she's fun-loving, social, and amazingly warm, positive person. She's really nice. That's really nice enough. But Grady, he really liked you as well. He said about you, he's the most casual, laid-back, responsible person that I ever met. He had an amazing calming effect on me. He'd always say, "Don't worry, it'll work out," and it always did. And then he went to say, his family was awesome. I only met 4 of them, but they were amazing. Now, the reason I read those out for you and the listeners is that the people you meet on the AT are some of the most memorable people you're ever going to meet in your life. And there's a fellow traveler giving his impression of the 2 of you. So how important was that social connection on the trail for the 2 of you when you were doing your hike last year?
Well, it started early. It started early and it started strong. I think
the social connection was everything. Absolutely everything. I think our trail experience was what it was as a result of the people that we met. After time, hiking is hiking, and yes, you can get so much from being in the beautiful outdoors and seeing the beautiful natural things. But at the end of the day, it's those social interactions that made you smile before you went to bed. And we certainly developed very strong bonds, particularly within our tramily, of people who are from all different walks of life, different ages, different cultural backgrounds. And we became a family, a real family. And those people know us better than we know ourselves almost. And what Kat says about Lucky, he must say to me, everything will be fine about 17 times a day. So I know that Kat knows that because that's what he says all the time.
And Kat and I started out on, we started the same day. We didn't really meet until day 2, but we hiked.
How long is that?
we hiked from day 2 until
New
Jersey. So, I mean, we hiked every day. There was not a day that went by that we weren't either, that we didn't stay at the same place, or we would hike, parts of the day together.
What about the night that you got kidnapped?
Oh yeah, that was really funny.
I'm going to hang on before you do that. That's one of the questions I'm going to ask you at the end. Oh. So we won't go into that yet.
That was a different one. That's a different one actually. It's not our relationship. I had a family aunt, a family friend of. It's very interesting.
Is this something to do with Elizabethton?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So there are more questions. Got it. Okay.
We'll come back to that. So
funny.
When the 2 of you, I mean, this is funny because for me, had this been your year, you 2 would never have met, would you? So
no.
Where did the 2 of you meet for the first time then?
We met at Standing Bear Hostel at the end of the Smokies.
Oh, how romantic.
Yeah.
No one could ask for a better place.
I totally agree. I love it there. I stayed there both times, 2014 and 2019. I loved it there both times.
Oh, yeah.
The campfire was roaring. The
boys were singing around the campfire. I didn't really care about who was there or what anything was happening. All I cared about was food, because I'd run out of food on the last day of the Smokies, and I hiked something like, at that point, it was like my longest day of like 20 miles or something. And I hiked in and I was like, hello, someone give me food immediately. We met there, and Grady was singing around the campfire with a couple of other guys that I'd met.
We wrote a song about the Smokies. It had a couple verses. But when I first met Togs, it was through what was his name?
Boston Jack.
Yeah, his name was Jack, and he was from Boston, and he was in charge of. He was caretaking Standing Bear. He was admitting people, checking people in, checking people out. And Togs had phoned ahead to see if there was space, and Jack got off the phone and he said, "Guys, there's 4 Australian girls coming in." And it was Togs talking about herself, Frozen,
and a couple of other guys,
2 other guys. So it was an English girl, 3 other guys, but we had 4 Australian girls coming in, and we were all excited. We're like, "Oh, 4 Australian girls sounds great."
Nothing wrong with that, yeah.
Very disappointing when I rocked up.
Oh, it was quite good, and we sang around the fire, and it was, kind of one of those, "Oh, hi, you're hiking the trail too. Sounds great." We all left. We met again the next night, and then we were in Hot Springs together. We ate burgers. We celebrated a fellow through hikers' birthday, and we just got to know each other.
It was during that. I think we had about 3 or 4
yeah.
nights where it was just Lucky, Cat, me, and Frozen. So they were Frozen was also in our little tramily.
The beginnings of the tramily.
Yeah, and so I think it was on those few days that we really started to develop a bond between the 4 of us, and it's just nice because there wasn't so many of us around. I mean, we as kind of in that we were a little early. We were kind of early starters, and so we actually only hiked around. We think we only hiked around about 20 hikers the whole way.
All right. How interesting.
We knew who was ahead of us, and we knew somewhat who was behind us. And it was always the same people. We were bumping into the same people over and over. In fact, there was a group that they called themselves the Frubble, the front bubble. And they were either ahead of us or behind us. We knew they were either ahead of us or behind us at different points of the hike, but I actually never met them.
I never met them either.
So they were either ahead or behind us, and we still never met them, but we knew they were there.
Yeah.
So
that happens on the trail a lot, doesn't it? Yeah, you don't see anybody for 1,500 miles and you see them again. It's quite amazing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it developed into a relationship, obviously, and apparently, Natalie, your best friend came out to hike with you. And she knew there was something between the two of you before you even did.
Right.
Is that right?
Well, actually, my dad came out first. My dad came out for a week first. And at the time, Grady and I, Lucky and I were just very,
we were friends.
Very good friends. But apparently, unbeknown to me, my sister told me later that apparently Dad had come home and said, don't be surprised if something happens between those two, to my sister. So she wasn't surprised when I told her.
That was Virginia, and we were just friends.
Yeah. And then Sue came out, and she got on a train, or I got on the train. I left her in New York City, got on the train, and it was like, like the movies where, you got the window open and you're waving out to your best friend, and she's spent a week hiking with you, and she shouts down the platform, "You're an idiot if you don't think he likes you." And I was like, okay.
And that was New Jersey. So
she definitely knew.
I tell you, Lucky, those northern girls, they're really slow on the uptake.
I know. I don't know what I've got myself into.
Right.
Now,
so when we spoke before, so you told me that you sustained a concussion, Natalie, and I didn't really ask you about it. How did that happen?
Yeah, so actually on the end, so Sue is my best friend, and as a result, as at the end, we had hiked with Lucky and the rest of our family, Marika and Frozen, during that time. And then we had left to go to the New York City for a day. So
it was
we had gone to have
weekend.
a girls' night, and the boys we'd organized with the boys about how I was going to catch them up, and I was going to they were going to do a few less miles, and I was going to do a few big miles, and I was going to catch them in three days or something like that. Sure. Because we also had a bit of a plan to get to Boston for Lucky's brother's graduation. So we'd sort of got a bit of a plan going on. And so we were now at this point of, planning our miles rather than just sort of walking for anywhere. And so I left Sue in New York City. I came back to High Point in New Jersey. And I set off on my little small mission to catch the boys, and less than a mile in, I fell, and it was a non-exciting fall. It was just a trip on all those little rocks, and I just went flat face forwards, straight onto my head, and I actually I think I probably did pass out, but I completely can't remember. But I came around, and there was nobody around.
Came around in Vermont.
Yeah. I got myself together, and I'd hit my head, but I'd hit my knee, and my knee was what was giving me some trouble, but I could feel that I'd hit my head. And so I got my phone out to look through my selfie mirror and saw that I had a huge egg on my head, but it wasn't where I felt like I'd hit my head. So I felt like I hit my head on the top and had this egg on my head in the middle of my forehead. And I was like, no. So I actually called Frozen because I knew he'd always have his phone.
I never answered my phone pretty much the entire trail. So
I said, "Hey, Fro, I've fallen over." And he said, "Oh no, Tog." I said, "Can I speak to Lucky?" And at that point I thought, "Oh, that's interesting. I'm definitely not really with it, but definitely asking for Lucky." So I spoke to Lucky, and we decided at that point, some day walkers came past, and they actually got me off trail. So they carried my bag.
She was about a half mile away from where she started, so they were able to easily get her back to the high point.
They got me back to high point. My trekking poles had broken, so they got me back to high point, and I felt pretty rough. So I decided I can't walk today. So I went to a hostel in New Jersey. And during the course of that day, I started to feel quite unwell. There was another hiker there who we'd been hiking with, who I knew, and he was excellent. He was an 18-year-old from Georgia, and he was lovely. And he sat with me, and I fell asleep, and he didn't leave my bedside, bless him. But I felt sick. I started to feel sick, and I thought, I probably should go to the hospital. And so I ended up in the hospital with concussion. And I had, I think I took 3 days off trail before I thought, if I don't go now, I'm never going to catch them. And so
still had a long way to catch up though, didn't you?
Yeah, it was about 140 miles that they had got ahead of me. Clearly weren't waiting for me, Steve.
Well, I'd like to preface that. One of the things I love the most about Togs is that she is a fiercely independent and very strong woman. And unbeknownst to us, she calls us, tells us she's fallen down, hit her head. We're about 2 to 3 days ahead of her at this point on the trail. And she says this, and she says, but I'm going to try to keep hiking after I have had a day of rest. And we're like, okay, well, that's probably not the best idea. My advice was to mitigate concussions and try to get her to have some rest. And she kept saying, oh, I'm going to keep hiking. I'm going to keep hiking. I'm going to catch you up. And it took her 2 days, 2 to 3 days.
I think it was 4 days in the end. We were about a week.
To get back on trail.
Oh yeah.
To get back on trail, it took 3 days after the concussion, after she'd been to the doctor. And we were still hiking to Boston because that was the I had to get off for my brother's graduation, but the plan was always to pick her up. No matter where she was, New Jersey, New York, didn't matter where she was. We were going to pick her up.
I didn't like the thought of having to start behind them again.
That didn't sit well with her.
And I would never have missed any miles. So
our plan was never to leave her. It was that it doesn't matter where you are. How about you stay at High Point? We'll pick you up. You can come to Boston, take some time off, because we took a week off we took 5 days off in Boston just to see everything, to be there, to have a good rest. Sure. But the plan that was the plan, was like, doesn't matter, just hang out, rest your knee, rest your head. But
she's shaking her head, and I totally understand what you're saying there, Tom.
My wonderful it was so good, because she said, no, I'm going to keep hiking. We're like, okay, well, do what you got to do. And she caught us up in 4 days. I had a set time that his mum was picking us up from the trail. So his mum was picking us up at 8:00 from Connecticut. From where were we? Connecticut. We were in Bulls Run Bridge.
Yeah,
I know exactly where it is. Yeah,
and and the time was 8 a.m. You got to be there for 8 a.m. Togs. I'm like, crikey, got it. 5 a.m. I'm on the trail trying to do the last, I don't know what it was, like 9 miles or something that morning. And I get to the trailhead at 5 to 8, and there is one of my tramily members around. And I get a call from Lucky to say, just walk another half a mile up the road. We're in a cafe. And I'm like, are you joking? I said, I will, but you better have bought me a coffee by the time I get there.
Well, you caught them up. You caught them up, which was great. So, I did. And I'd imagine that having met one another by now, and now in a relationship, you were kind of, I guess you were probably a little nervous when you approached Katahdin, because you did have to go back to Oz at some stage, didn't you, Natalie?
We did.
So, what was the last day like for you?
Oh, the last day.
It was.
Gosh, I mean, I was physically done. So from a physical point of view, I couldn't have walked another step. Once I got to the car park at the bottom of Katahdin, I didn't want to walk for a long time. So physically I was done, but mentally I was definitely not done. And
it was a surreal day.
It took us a while. It took us a good few, I don't know about you, but it took us a few weeks, I think, to really appreciate what we had done. It was, Katahdin was an amazing day, absolutely amazing day, but so many mixed emotions.
I still haven't got over my 2014 hike yet. Certainly haven't dealt with the 2019 one. So.
Well, it's good to look forward to. We're happy about that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had discussed, what our plan was going to be after the trail. I had about a month left on the visa. So
she had a ticket booked from LA back to Brisbane approximately, about a month later.
Yeah, you did a road trip, didn't you then? That was it.
That was, he did a road trip, and then he dropped me off at LA and said, well, that was a fun summer, love. See you later.
It was pretty.
Hang on. That isn't the end of it, is it? Because something kind of special happened on Christmas Eve. What happened then?
We got married.
In your in your snowshoes in Colorado?
Yeah,
in snowshoes in Colorado.
Hiking boots and snowshoes, and
we had our packs with us.
With our packs, and the two of us eloped to Colorado and got married on Christmas Eve.
We had our tux and dress and our packs and our snowshoes.
Who had the tux, who had the dress?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we argued about that.
Yeah, exactly. Of course you did. And now, as I mentioned earlier, Catmando clearly thinks well of you two. So let's say what he wants you to talk about.
Okay.
And if the questions or the answers are inappropriate, I'm going to cut them out. So don't worry about it. Natalie, you go first. Tell us about your first DQ blizzard, your Dairy Queen blizzard.
Oh, well, that was great. That happened in Parisburg. Is that right? Yeah.
There is one there. There is one there. I remember it well. Yeah.
In Pennsylvania. Yeah, that's right.
And these two were banging on about, I hope there's a Dairy Queen. And I, casually slipped in, I don't know what either of you are talking about. Well, they stopped in their tracks. Are you telling me you've never been to a Dairy Queen? No. Right. So then that was the mission. So we hiked in, and I think we even got a hitch to a Dairy Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And they ordered for me, and I sat down and had the most delicious ice cream drink that I've ever had. And
blizzard.
Yeah.
It's awesome, isn't it?
And that was the beginning of a beautiful relationship between me and Dairy Queen blizzards.
I actually mentioned the Dairy Queen blizzard in my book in my 2014 hike. It was
good.
It was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? Yeah.
It's calorie. It's calories have never tasted so good. So
you're absolutely right. Now, Grady, you kind of preempted this one already, but I hear you were abducted in Elizabethton. So how did that happen?
I was kidnapped. So
kidnapped is good.
Catmando and we stayed with. He had a childhood friend who lived one town over from Elizabethton in Tennessee, and we stayed there. Catmando hung out. They told old stories. I got to hear all about young Catmando and all the trouble that they used to get into. In the meantime, I had messaged my grandmother, who her entire family was in both Virginia and Tennessee. And my grandmother's sister, who I wasn't ever really close to. I actually never met her because it was an extended family from that side. And I had messaged her, and she said she was going to come, see me. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. I'm here. I'm hanging out with Catmando's friend, and it'd be great to have her stop by and to meet extended family. Well, she comes through the front door and immediately hugs me, like big bear hug. She was a force of a woman, and she's absolutely lovely. Her name's Patty, and she's absolutely was that cousin? Yeah, my grandmother's cousin. Sorry. And she's an absolute force of a woman. She's like, oh, you gotta come back to our house. You gotta come see this. We've made you dinner. We've made you steaks. We've made you this, that, the other. And I'm looking at Cat like, if I don't come back, you know where I've gone. And he's looking at me. And he says, "You're coming back, right?" And I'm like, "Yep, I'm coming back." And my phone was practically dead, and I didn't have a charger for it. But I left, and I was treated very nicely. I had steak, everything. It was fantastic. But my phone was dead, and there was no reception from her house. So I was unable to tell Catmando what had happened. So they waited up for me all night until, 11 or so, hoping that I would come back. ready for me to come back, and I never came back. So I didn't come back until I was dropped off the next morning.
Released.
And yes, and
the way that Kat tells
yeah.
it is like that he was like waking up, didn't have a very good night's sleep, kept checking in the room to see if Lucky had come back.
And I get there, and Patty drops me off, and Catmando makes a big point of he's like, you have a chip in you? Have you been abducted? Like what's happened? It was quite a funny thing because to meet her, she's very much a personality. So it was funny that she's whirlwind in and swooped off with me and no word after that. So it was quite funny.
Now the next two probably are going to be cut because I'm not sure what your answer could possibly be to this, Natalie. Did the guys corrupt you on the trail?
Oh yes, completely. I was so sweet and innocent before it.
I think
I was so naive. I didn't know anything about anything, and then I hung around with 6 guys. And
well, there's a hilarious story about that. I want to
expand upon that, though. I want to expand on that a second. So, did this? You sound, and we haven't actually mentioned this, but did this trip do something for you anyway in terms of your confidence? And let's face it, you were hiking with 6 other guys all the time, so you've got to hold your own, I guess, as well. Did that really help you as well?
I think it did. I think that I think if there was some self-reflection, it would be that those guys made me feel part of the gang, and I was just myself on the trail. So I think it was like it was a good self-reflection in that it felt like people liked me, and these guys.
I've never met a person that doesn't like her.
But
I can imagine you could tell from Kat as well. He loves her, so
Well, yeah, it did give my personal confidence a boost. I would say, just feeling, it's like anyone. People want to feel part of something, and I felt part of this group of people,
sure.
and I thought the world of them, and they all came with their own quirks and their own little personality traits, and like I said, we were all very different, but we got on very, very well. I think probably underneath it all, we probably did have very similar outlooks on life, and
it was a good mesh of personalities. I think all of us, none of us were, we weren't really like a partying group. We weren't out there to do anything other than to hike and to have fun in nature. And I think that common mindset definitely helped us out, that we all were very agreeable with each other. I mean, not just, the friendships you make on the trail are very fast, very quick, and very, very powerful. But I think we all meshed as a personality group, that no one was really any outliers.
Right.
So we've all stayed together very well after the trail.
Well, maybe Catmando will write to me to tell me how you were corrupted on the trail. So you never know.
Probably referring to a couple of things, like for instance, we'd walk down the trail, and I might be like, maybe we weren't always 7 in a row, but like we'd be a bit apart, and I'd find myself, with turn a corner and see 3 bums in my face whilst they're all having wheeze, and I'd be like, guys, and they're like, oh, Togs, you're not that delicate. I'm like, actually, I am, and I think.
Now you mentioned that particular bit, this actually leads on to the next one, which is Grady, and this is almost certainly going to be cut, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Tell us about being out of toilet paper at Cable Gap Shelter.
Oh, so that's actually not so bad. That kind of reaffirms my trail name, which is Lucky. I got my trail name given to me on day 1, actually, or day 2.
Wow.
It was I think it was maybe day 1 or 2, but I had already found there were Trail Magic beers, there were Trail Magic Cliff Bars that no one else had seen. So no one else in the shelter had seen the Trail Magic. And I walk in and I said, you guys didn't pick one up? There was Trail Magic beers and Trail Magic Cliff Bars and everything. So the name Lucky, that's how the name Lucky began. I get to Cable Gap Shelter, and I immediately I'm telling Kat, I'm like, oh man, I've run out of toilet paper, and that's going to be bad because tomorrow's the day that we're getting off trail for our first resupply. And lo and behold, in the rafters of Cable Gap. Okay, so I'll back up. I'll back up. I'll leave you hanging there. in Cable Gap Shelter, for anyone that remembers or knows, it was a mouse-infested shelter. The logbook was completely eaten on the sides. It had every nibble mark on it.
Nice.
It was one of those shelters that was a little bit scummy in the corners, but in the rafters was a pristine, untouched, it wasn't wet, it wasn't discolored. It was like it came out of the factory, just wedged in the top. A full roll of toilet paper, not even a partial roll, a full roll of pristine toilet paper was sitting in the top. So that really cemented the trail name Lucky, because I had just run out and there was a brand new roll in a mouse-infested shelter.
That's awesome. That's a great story. And the last one, and I'm not sure who it's for, what are free downpours?
Okay.
Oh.
So this comes back from our very good friend, America, who, as his name suggests, he's a patriotic American from North Carolina. And at points,
I would say he was the group's entertainer.
He was the entertainer.
He had the worst singing voice I've ever heard.
He also had the worst gas of anyone I've ever met. But he's a very good guy. He works with he's a recreational
wilderness therapist.
He's a wilderness therapist for kids, troubled kids.
Wow.
So he's a really good guy. But at points, his accent was hard to understand. And I'm from Texas and I understand, Southern accent. All my family's from the South. And America turns to Catmando and I, and he says, it was in the morning. We were somewhere in Pennsylvania. And he says, "Hey, can you get the fur down for us?" And we're like, "Pardon?" And he says, "Can you get the fur down for us?" And we're like, one more time. He says, "The fur down for us." And I'm like, "The free downpours?" And he says, "Can you get the food down for us?" And we were so confused because it sounded like he's like, "Hey, can you get the for down for us?" For down for us? We're like, we don't understand.
So then, as a result of that, from Pennsylvania to Maine, every morning when someone got the bear bags down,
"Hey, can you get the for down for us?"
Can you get the free downpours?
That is awesome. Well, look, this conversation has gone on longer than nearly any we've ever had.
No.
And mainly, no, and in a good way, because two things: one, you're in quarantine and you're desperate to talk to other people.
Right.
Oh yes, this is us. You're our outlet.
And the other is that Catmando wrote to me, and I thought to myself, I'd already written my questions that I wanted to ask because we'd had that conversation before, so I knew what I wanted to ask. But I thought they were such good questions. I wanted to have those as well. So I'm so glad that he wrote in, and it's been a delight talking to you both. And when you get out eventually in 2 days' time, hope you enjoy Australia. And thanks for coming on and talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Hey,
for having
Steve,
us on.
can we just really quickly, because I'm pretty sure my friends will kill me if I don't mention them. Can we just tell you who was in our tramily?
Of course.
So we had America, Catmando, Frozen, RD, and Farmer, and we love them all.
All right.
Shout out to those guys.
Yeah.
They made our hike.
They did.
That's cool. Well, I'm delighted to see the two of you together. Delighted you met and fell in love with each other on the trail, which is awesome, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wish you the very best in the future.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Take it easy.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
What a terrific couple they are. Both beautiful souls and clearly popular with their tramily. I thought their empathy toward the class of 2020 was very well expressed. Thanks to Catmando for pointing me in their direction. While I remember, I wanted you all to know that our competition for the 6 books is still open, but about to be closed. Bruce Matson has mailed me the books that he was waiting for from the printer, so I'll close it on Saturday and announce the winner on the Hiking Radio Network Facebook page and, of course, on this show next week. Remember the questions? Number 1 is, what is the largest non-hut shelter on the AT? Number 2 is, in which town do participants in the Curly Maple Pizza Challenge purchase the beer and pizza necessary to complete the challenge? Number 3 is, what shelter has the highest elevation on the trail? Send in the answers to steve@mightyblueontheat.com and you'll go into the draw on Saturday and the winner gets all 6 books. Now, it's Kate Stillwell. Well, we're back on with Kate. Hi, Kate. How are you?
I am doing great, Steve. Thanks. It's been quite a long day, so I'm a little bit pooped. And by the way, it's Phoenix. Trail name Phoenix. Nobody knows me by Kate.
so it's absolutely nobody knows that you're Kate. That's interesting. So you are definitely Phoenix. So I need to start referring to you as Phoenix. You're like, okay. So where actually are you now then, Phoenix?
In Carlisle.
Oh, are you?
We did a 16-mile day.
Wow. So how many miles are you in then so far?
I'm 106.
Wow. We're speaking now on Tuesday night, and we first spoke to you a week ago, last spoke to you a week ago Tuesday. And so really you've done in about 7 or 8 days, you've done over 100 miles, have you?
Yep. The first day was 7 miles, and that was a partial day. So if you figure 99 miles in 7 days, yeah, that's about just under 14 miles a day.
Wow, you've really stepped it up quickly. Do you think the experience you had before, going with your daughter before, do you think you're regaining your rhythm now and getting into it faster than you thought you might?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I'm much more aware of what to focus on for safety.
Right.
Which becomes really mentally exhausting because you're looking at your feet most of the time, other than the point between Boiling Springs and Carlisle. There's just so many rocks and stuff that you can't even look up for more than a second or two. So by the end of the day, it's even if you could go more miles, your brain is just like, oh, I don't want to look anymore. My eyes hurt. Please don't make me do this.
I'm thinking back to my hike last year, and I went to Boiling Springs, obviously, and we went the next day all the way to Duncannon. We did a 26-mile day, the only time we ever did a 26-mile day. So where is the cutout for Carlisle then?
Well, it's a half a mile from the trail that goes over the highway. You scoot down the side, and it's a half a mile to the Quality Inn.
I never knew that.
What I'm saying.
I never knew that. You know what? We intended to do a long day. We didn't expect to do a 26-mile day, but I never knew Carlisle was an option. I thought it was from Boiling Springs. So we stopped in at Boiling Springs and stayed by the railway track. Literally, when it sounded like the train was coming through my tent. So do you think?
Oh my gosh, there are more trains going through that whole section.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. And it's funny, actually, it's one of the sounds I remember from 2019 that revitalize or just rekindle my memories from 2014. The sound of trains all around there is amazing, isn't it?
And I keep thinking of Dumbo. Every time I hear the train whistle, my mind goes to when my kids were little and we would play Dumbo and oh Mom, let's watch Dumbo again. Okay, honey, I've only seen it 45 times. That's okay. 46 is just perfect.
So you're now in Carlisle and you've done all these miles so far. How are you feeling?
I'm actually feeling great. I have been dealing with some blisters, and unfortunately, I see a new one that came at the end of today that I didn't even feel a hot spot.
Oh,
but
bonus.
Yeah, no, all that feels pretty good. My legs are swelling a bit, so they're up a wall right now, but.
Oh, happy days, eh? Happy days. So
be in a bed.
And I know that you were expecting rain last week, and we haven't actually spoken literally for a week now. So, how has that been so far? How's the weather been?
The weather's been pretty amazing. One day it did rain off and on and drizzle, but other than that, today had to have been one of the 10 best days of the year.
Wow!
It was blowing 30 miles an hour, but it kept you cool. And for some reason, going Nobo this time of year, the sun is behind you, moving from your right shoulder to your left.
Sure.
But it's behind you; it's not in your eyes.
Right.
And the wind was in our back. So it reminded me of that Irish blessing, may the sun be on your face and the wind at your back. And I don't know what else it says, but whatever. It was really one of the best days ever. And hiking with Rocky Road has been so much fun.
Tell us about Rocky Road. I know you've teamed up with her. Is it her? Is it she? Sorry,
him. No, it's him.
Oh, there we are.
Him.
Yeah.
I ran into Rocky Road coming down from Tumbling Run
Tumbling
Shelter,
Run, yeah.
And he's hiking to Duncannon. So we will have, when we finally get there, that'll be 5 or 6 days together, I guess, maybe 5 days. It just so happens we have the same pace, which is very strange. Isn't
it funny though? You get these relationships very, very quickly, and you're all on the same page because you're at the same place. And did he start from Harper's as well?
No, Penmar.
Oh, right. Okay. So he doesn't want to go any further. He just hasn't got the time, or what?
Well, he's done the rest of Pennsylvania in 2 other sections.
Right.
And so this is the last section of Pennsylvania for him to do.
Right.
So to have done the whole state.
Wow. Nice.
But yeah, he doesn't have time, or I guess the inclination to do a through hike.
Right. Well, I know that you've met quite a few people so far, haven't you? How are people around, each other out there? We have talked about this, and I want to talk about this in a minute in slightly more detail, but how are people with one another now with this virus thing?
Awesome. If the day hikers that we pass, I pull up my buff, they put up their buff or mask, and that's it. But when I entered Pennsylvania, the first shelter that I wanted to stay at was Tumbling Run, and I had all my laundry out because they have clotheslines. And
that's right. They do, don't they? That's amazing, isn't it? There's 2 shelters. Yeah. There's a snoring shelter and a non-snoring shelter.
Exactly. So I was all set up, and I'm sitting there with my hiker skirt, my 2 jackets, tied front to back and back to front. And I'm sitting there making dinner, and I look up because I hear something, and a woman says something, and I'm like, oh, I don't know where the caretaker is. She goes, no, we are the caretaker. Oh, right. Why are you here? Oh. And I'm surprised. And she said, you did see that the shelter is closed. I said, yes, well, I was going to tent. And she said, well, I said, I just came up from Maryland. And in Maryland, the signs are everywhere, but the privies are open. And as long as you tent, you're fine. And she said, well, in Pennsylvania, they actually bolted the privy shut with boards. She said that the privies, the shelters, and the campsites at a shelter are closed. Ooh. So you will have to move on. And meantime, my laundry is hanging. I did my first 12.2 miles. I looked at her. It was 5:30 in the evening. My dinner was cooking, and I said, "I'm sorry, I can't move, and my feet won't do 2 more steps. Much less he's telling me go hike up a half a mile up the hill or go over there. I'm like, I can't do it. I'm sorry. It's like I'm listening to you speak to me, but I'm not going anywhere." So eventually she told me to, stay in the shelter. Don't put any tents up and try to be so that nobody sees you. And I'm like, okay. Right. It turns out they had thrown out a bunch of people all day.
Oh, wow. Wow. So that's interesting. Yeah. So you are getting some negativity then. I mean, how have other people, I'm sure you're not getting negativity from other hikers. How are you, what about other people? What sort of people are out there?
Well, okay, well, here you go. When she said, where are you going tomorrow? I said, Quarry Run. And she said, well, that's closed too. And I'm like, okay, fine. I will stay at one of the campsites because there were plenty posted on Guthook. So as I met Rocky Road, there was a guy, Germ, who Germ was going south, Rocky Road was going north. And I happened to stumble upon them as they were chatting. And Rocky Road had been tossed out by these people the night before, a few hours before I had arrived. And Germ said, oh, go to Quarry Run. It's wonderful. It's open. He has his flowers hanging and the privy's open, smells, but it's open. so we hiked up there. There was a Hispanic family. There had to have been 15 of them just enjoying the day. And then there were these two local guys, DJ and Tanner. Hi, guys. And they were going to spend the night. And then a dad, Luke, and his son, Max, were there to do an overnight. And then Rocky and I. And we had such an amazing afternoon. The Spanish people gave us food.
Spanish people always give you food.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is because there were a lot of overnighters, all these, if you run into a thru hiker, no one shares food, right? Because everybody needs their own food.
Sure.
Well, with all these overnighters, I was given toilet paper, wipes. I'm like, wow, this is gold. They were giving me food. I left with more food than I arrived with.
Well, look, I've got to tell you, I'm glad you're having a good time out. And before I tell you this, are you having fun?
I'm having a blast.
Right.
I'm having a blast.
And what about resupply? Have you resupplied yet?
No, because I think my food pack is heavier than it was when I started. It's ridiculous.
That is ridiculous.
And then, well, I stuffed it full of these kind bars, thinking I'd have 2 a day.
Sure.
And I just can't eat them. So that I think it's like that 4 pounds is still in there. But then Rocky Road and I met 2 gals who are Nobo flip-floppers, Mel Bazar and Rosie, as in Rosie the Riveter.
Right.
So if you think of a bologna sandwich, they're one piece of bread. I'm the bologna. And then today I met 2 guys who started in Georgia.
All right. Wow.
And they're going to Katahdin. And they are, I had seen posts from one guy. His name is a Yellow Submarine.
Right.
And he hikes with like Gandalf, stick.
Yeah.
And the other guy is Fodor spelled backwards, which is Rodolph. Rodolph. Rodof.
All right.
Yeah, my brain. I swear, my brain's not working anymore.
Yeah,
anyway,
it's okay. It does tend to switch off when you're out there. It's a good thing.
No. Yeah. So they're ahead of me. I'm in the middle, and then these 2 gals are somewhere behind me. So, and we're all headed to Katahdin. So, how cool is that?
Yeah, I think it's cool. I've had, and I wasn't necessarily going to mention this, but I'm going to mention it now, actually. I had an email from a listener who asked me to reconsider actually putting this section into the show. And I'm going to read out the email exchange that I had with them after I've finished interviewing with you. But by and large, there are so many arguments for and so many arguments against this. And my feeling is that, one of my feelings is that I committed myself to do this. I was following your hike. I'm not necessarily agreeing whether you should or shouldn't be there. This is your choice to do whatever you want to do. But some people seem to believe it's their choice to tell you what you should do. And I'm going to read out after this interview, I'm going to read out the email I got and the response I gave them as well. So I just think you're enjoying yourself. Frankly, I'm glad you are. I can imagine you're going to have some tough moments out there, and I hope you're okay with that.
It is harder.
I'm sure it's, you know what?
It is a lot harder.
I think people, if they finish this hike this year, if they're the class of 2020, that will be remembered as the toughest year ever to do this hike. So you'll gain something from that, but I'm sure you're going to lose something from that as well because you don't have as much interaction. But if you're comfortable with what you're doing and you're having good fun, that's all that really matters, isn't it?
Well, I didn't do this for fun. I did this because it's something that was important to me.
Right.
It's a journey I wanted to take. It's a journey that had been interrupted with a broken arm a few years ago on the trail. And when you think that I started on the trail after Maryland, the state of Maryland, opened up camping for Marylanders.
Right.
So if Governor Hogan felt it was appropriate for Marylanders to go out camping, it seemed to me that it was okay to go back to the plan, and I switched it all up. I'm not going south because I'm not sure that they have it on straight what they're doing down there. But it seemed to me that going north, the states were clearer on what was important for them to do with regard to this whole thing. And I was also within 3 hours where my family could come collect me.
Sure.
Should things change or deteriorate. So I was doing what I thought was a reasonable, made a reasonable decision. But all of my resupplies require that I walk from the trail to resupply. I'm not hitchhiking.
Right.
Every place that we've been to, people have been wearing masks. I wear my mask in. Today in the parking lot here at Quality Inn or whatever it's called, all the plates in the parking lot, there was Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, one Pennsylvania.
Right.
So I'm sitting here going, and all these businesses are thrilled. We stopped at Green Mountain Store.
I remember it well.
Yesterday.
I remember it well, yeah.
Yeah. And they'd never shut down, and they are thrilled to see you. So for the ATC at this point to say, well, we've convened a committee, and then the committee doesn't do anything. And then they do put out that through hikers, we are not going to recognize your efforts this year whatsoever if you decide to hike. And if you decide to hike after March, whatever, because we've said that you can't do it.
Yeah.
It's punitive. It's, I think, mean-spirited. It's not supporting through hikers. There are 3 million people that hit the AT every year. How many of them are through hikers? 5,000?
Tops. Yeah, tops.
I mean, so for me, I think they're being very short-sighted. I don't think I'm going to continue my membership with ATC, and I don't think my friends will either, because I don't think they've been proactive. I think they've been reactive. I think they're covering their butts for liability, but I've said too much.
No, you know what? You haven't, because, everybody's got opinions over this. If I was on the trail, I would have come off, but that's me. I'm older than you, and I feel I would be more at risk than you. You're comfortable out there. It's absolute. Of course, it's your choice. And people have written to me and said, this is not a choice at all, but it is a choice, and you're making that choice. And I understand and respect you for doing that. But I'm really just covering what you're doing on your journey. I think it's an interesting thing, and I think some of the negativity is interesting as well, but some of the positivity is as well, because I'm sure as many people as think you're doing the wrong thing, there are just the same number of people on the other side thinking you're doing the right thing. So good for you.
Well, yeah, and half the people think I'm crazy for doing this, and half the people think it's great that I'm doing it.
Yes.
Just the idea of hiking the AT.
Yeah, don't worry, Kate.
So,
the crazy thing will always stay with you. Don't worry about that. Yeah, you're always going to be the crazy one in the family, so don't worry about that. But look, we haven't been able to speak, and I've been worried about you because I thought perhaps because you hadn't even texted me, so I was slightly concerned about you. But you're still going well. You've done over 100 miles in a week, which is just amazing. For me, anyway, as a hiker who took a long time to get to 100 miles in the first week. So I just hope it keeps on going well for you, and we'll catch up again soon. Okay.
Well, thank you, and sorry about before, but the service was really poor.
I'm sure. No worries. No worries. You take it easy, okay? And I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Bye. When we finished, we carried on chatting, and Kate added this.
If I had started, with a bubble in February, and in March, the ATC asked everyone to get off because of COVID, I would have gotten off as well.
I'm sure.
But as time had passed, and as Maryland decided to start opening up, I would have made the same decision to go back on.
Okay.
But I would have initially honored that request, unlike the two gentlemen who continue to hike. They started in Springer, the two older guys that I was telling you about, Yellow Submarine, and they just said, to them, it's just been a wonderful experience, and they feel safer on the trail because they're quarantined all the time. They don't meet anybody.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure actually those of you who are out there are probably safer than most of us. So, it's just when you go into town, which may be an issue, but you sound like you're addressing that well. So. I mentioned an email exchange I had with a listener, and I was going to share it with you. But then, just as I was about to record my comments and put the show together, I received an email from the ATC along with a letter to AT hikers. That's much more important than my flawed reasoning, so I thought I'd share the email with you instead. It's quite long, but stick with me. It reads, I'm reading it off my phone now. It reads, Dear Steve, very nice, protecting and managing the Appalachian Trail while ensuring the safety and health of our staff, AT volunteers, visitors and trailside communities are the top priorities of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy during this challenging time. While the ATC continues to recommend staying at home and staying away from the AT, we understand that many of you are considering hikes on the AT as your state's stay-at-home orders expire or shift to safer-at-home recommendations. In recognition of this highly dynamic situation, the ATC believes the scientific information has become clearer on how to keep yourself and those around you safe from COVID-19. Based on that science, we offer the following guidance. Before you decide to head out, ask yourself 3 questions. Are you or anyone in your group exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19, or have you been in contact with someone diagnosed with COVID-19? Is there an official closure of the section of the AT you are planning to hike? Are you or anyone in your group missing any essential gear to not only have a safe and healthy hike, but also mitigate the spread or contraction of COVID-19? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, we ask you to stay at home. If the answer to all of these questions is no, we recommend the following. Be self-sufficient. In addition to the 10 hiker essentials, carry a CDC-approved mask and hand sanitizer. Practice social distancing. If not possible, make sure you are wearing a mask and other personal protective equipment to help stop the spread of COVID-19. As this virus can remain on hard surfaces for days, we advise not using trail resources like shelters, privies or picnic tables. If you come into contact with hard surfaces, either wash your hands if possible or use hand sanitizer. Pack a trowel so you can dig cat holes, 70 adult steps from the trail, campsites and water sources, and carry out toilet paper, instead of using privies on the trail. For overnight trips, use a tent or other personal shelter and carry a bear-resistant food storage device to avoid using a bear box, cables or pole. Treat your hike like a true backcountry experience that is not reliant on AT facilities you would otherwise use. Stay local. Hike close to home. Ensure you do not have to stop for gas or meals along the way. Check the trail closures page on our website before heading out, as the section of the trail you are planning to visit may have an official closure or other restrictions. Stay small. Hike only with members of your immediate household or in groups smaller than 6 people. Avoid well-known locations where there will likely be many visitors. Do not access the trail during high-traffic periods, weekends, holidays, etc. Have a backup plan in case the trailhead is crowded when you arrive. If the trailheads are full, turn back and return when crowds have dispersed. Do not park in undesignated areas or block roads or gates. Be prepared. Some of this is pretty obvious, actually. Be prepared. Carry a physical map of the area where you're hiking. Share your plans with someone you know in case you need assistance. Review Leave No Trace principles on our website so you can leave the trail the same or better than you found it. Being prepared not only protects you and the trail, it protects your fellow hikers, and should you become lost or injured, the search and rescue teams that would use their limited resources to come to assist you. Be respectful. If you head into town or on your trip, please wear PPE and use hand sanitizer to wash your hands with soap frequently. Contact businesses and service providers in advance to make sure they are open and follow local guidelines. Minimize the amount of time you spend in town. If you become ill on trail, particularly if you exhibit any symptoms associated with COVID-19, leave the trail and seek medical attention. Be patient. While some states are removing or relaxing stay-at-home orders, there are still numerous restrictions and closures on the trail. Over 100 shelters are still closed. At least 3 states have required or recommended 14-day quarantines upon entering, and restrictions are still active throughout 80 states. The trail may be closed near you. Even if open, certain trail facilities may not be open to public use. Keep yourself informed and check the ATC website for the latest updates. For thru hikers, we ask that you continue to postpone your thru hikes for the time being. On a thru hike, staying local is impossible and requires frequent stops in towns for resupply and shuttles to and from communities, creating multiple opportunities for contracting or spreading the virus. However, we have identified criteria for when this guidance will change. For more information, read our letter to 2020 thru hikers by clicking here. I have read that, but it pretty much says stay off it. We continue to appreciate everyone's assistance in keeping the trail community and the trail itself safe and healthy. Our personal health is now a collective issue. Unless everyone is safe, no one is safe. So please be prepared and be thoughtful when you head outdoors. The trail will be there through this crisis and beyond. Make sure you are safe and healthy now and in the future to enjoy all it has to offer. Thank you and be safe. The Appalachian Trail Conservancy team. Well, there it is. They're staying shut for thru hikers, though they are loosening up a little bit, it seems. As I say, not everyone agrees with the ATC or with the hikers out there now. If you feel that you've got some input and you would like to share it on this show, I'd welcome you anytime you like. Just reach out and we can set up a call. Finally today, of course, I want to thank those of you who continue to support the show financially. If you'd like to do that, pop on over to mightyblueontheat.com, click on the podcast tab, and you'll find the donate button hidden there somewhere. Cheers. Finally, Grandma Gatewood is having a torrid time with the weather as she nears the end of a hike, though nowhere near as torrid as her marriage had been. It's all coming to an end. I'll see you next week. Chapter 13. Destruction. August the 16th to the 20th, 1955. The folks at the Long Trail Lodge were expecting her, and when Emma arrived at the hotel near Killington, Vermont that afternoon, they fixed her a sandwich in the kitchen, then put her on the phone with a reporter from the Rutland Herald. Rutland was about 9 miles away. It seemed like the whole country wanted to know what she was up to now, and reporters were following her every move. If the first 3/4 of the journey had been considered a novel attempt at greatness by an eccentric old lady, now that she was on the home stretch, she had captured the attention of the country. An Associated Press dispatch went out the next day, reporting that Emma had lost 24 pounds and worn out 5 pairs of shoes. So far, she has walked 1,700 miles, the article read, with about 350 miles more to go to Mount Katahdin. 350 miles left. What the article didn't mention was that the miles before her were some of the most difficult, perilous miles on the trail. She had faced cold nights in the south in the spring, but there were nights ahead when the temperature would drop below freezing and the skies would spit stinging sleet. She had averaged roughly 15 miles a day so far, but her daily mileage would be cut to a third of that once she reached the White Mountains of New Hampshire just ahead. And as northbound hikers before her had learned, there were long stretches, including the daunting 100-mile wilderness, which was so isolated and inaccessible that carrying enough food to survive for a week or more was a necessity. Emma figured she might as well get started. She followed the narrowest path she'd encountered so far, about like a squirrel would use, she thought, up and over and around some boulders and into Gifford Woods State Park. Earl V. Schaefer stayed at the same park 7 years before on his inaugural thru hike in 1948. There I signed the register, then talked to Grace Barrows, the first and only lady ranger met on the long cruise, Schaefer wrote later. She told me that the lean-tos in the park were available for a nominal fee, but several hours of daylight remained and I decided to keep going. Mrs. Barrows misunderstood and always blamed herself for my going. She told me years later that she never charged a thru hiker after that, regardless of regulations. Alas, when Emma arrived, Mrs. Barrow, conflicted, said she did not like to charge, but as it was a state park, she was required to charge $1. Emma didn't mind and fetched $1 from her pocket, even if she planned to sleep in the grass. To ease her conscience, Emma wrote in her journal, she brought me a tray of hot baked potatoes, slices of ham, beets, bread, 2 slices of jelly roll, glass of milk and hot coffee. Mrs. Barrows mentioned that 2 young men had come off the trail and reserved the adjacent table on which to sleep. Emma was delighted to find it was the Navy boys who had helped her cross the creek. She gave them her drip coffee, some crackers, a piece of jelly roll and some cookies to supplement their dinner. They all stayed awake a while talking, and then Emma went to sleep on a big pile of leaves. In the night, she felt a couple of cold sprinkles on her face, and she quickly grabbed her sack and headed to the porch of the caretaker's home. The boys trudged up onto the porch a few minutes later, good and wet. A few other men who had been working on the trail had made their beds on the tables, so Emma lay on the floor. Soon enough, the rain started falling harder and blowing under the overhang, and the porch floor grew wetter by the minute. Emma climbed upon a table, and the Navy boys doubled up on another. None of them got much sleep. As they dried their clothes over a fire early the next morning, Hurricane Diane was plunging into the east coast 800 miles south, not far from where Hurricane Connie had made landfall 5 days before. The storm was packing winds of 100 miles per hour near the eye and moving west at 14 miles per hour, but observers were already saying that Diane wasn't going to cause nearly as much damage as Connie. Houses had been damaged by waves and streets were flooded in coastal towns, but the storm didn't pack the punch of its predecessor. It quickly began losing steam, so much so that hurricane warnings were expected to be called off that afternoon. What the forecasters weren't taking into account, however, was that the storm's path would keep it centred over the coast, so it continued to suck up moisture from the Atlantic and sling it inland, onto ground still saturated by Connie. On the trail, the hikers were oblivious. News came by word of mouth, and with the Washington Weather Bureau downplaying the storm already, there wasn't any alarm, even when the storm started tracking north. A volunteer who had been clearing the trail came with bad news. A beaver dam had caused flooding and the valley below was impassable. He knew Emma was hiking the trail, and he told her there was no way she could cross the flooded stretch. He offered to drive her around it, and she accepted. Faced with an impassable obstacle, these 2 miles were the only on the AT she'd miss. On August the 18th, Emma headed east toward the Connecticut River, the dividing feature between Vermont and New Hampshire, and in the evening she walked into a town called Heartland and looked for a store to stock up. She talked to the proprietor for a few minutes, and he told her she could probably find a place to stay about half a mile or so off the trail. She followed his directions and was headed down the road when a car pulled up beside her. A woman asked Emma her name, then said they had been searching for her. The woman was Mrs. Rutenick, and they were from Ohio. When they saw the newspaper story and realized Emma was so close and would be coming down the trail soon, they set out to find her. Mrs. Rutenick asked if Emma needed a place to stay the night and offered her a bed in a cabin they were house-sitting for some friends. Emma accepted the invitation and piled into the car and rode with them a few miles to the mountainside home, which had a lovely view of the countryside. Mrs. Rutenick had a baby and a few small children, but she didn't seem worried at all by her ragged company. She served Emma hot dogs and tomatoes as they sat outside and enjoyed the view. Meanwhile, to the south, the outer bands of Hurricane Diane, which had been downgraded to a tropical storm, were dumping water on New England as they moved north. Nobody seemed too concerned about the menacing clouds, but they soon began to understand that the new rainfall was rapidly filling smaller rivers and streams. It wasn't until late in the afternoon that the first flash flood warning was issued. As people across the region went to sleep to the sound of rain pattering their roofs, the water began to rise. The mayor of Milton, West Virginia, didn't know Emma's history, didn't know about PC or the decades of abuse or the details of their final fight, but he knew a battered spouse when he saw one, and he knew that a 53-year-old woman with broken teeth and a cracked rib did not belong in jail. He talked to her for a while and felt sorry for her. The miscarriage of justice had to be corrected. He invited Emma to stay in his home, safe and protected, until she got back on her feet. He got her a job working in a restaurant for some spending money. Back home, the children were in a state of confusion. Their mother had sent word that she was okay and that they'd be together soon, but the 3 still at home, Nelson, Louise and Lucy, didn't know what to expect next. They got up early one morning and, with the help of a few neighbours, killed and cleaned a hog. They built a fire under a barrel of water and strung the hog up before it was time for the kids to go to school. When they arrived home from school that afternoon, their father was gone. PC had taken the bedroom sets and furniture and nearly everything they owned out of the house. There on the table was half of the hog carcass, a parting gift. Nelson, the oldest still at home at 15, had been working as an assistant to the janitor at school, and he had always been tight with his money. His older sister Esther once asked him if he'd like a little spending money, and when he said he would, she gave him a dime. A few weeks later, she asked him if he needed a little more, and he replied, No, I still got that dime. He had eventually saved up enough money to buy a Remington single-shot bolt-action rifle and a bicycle with a headlight and fenders for $26 from Montgomery Ward in Huntingdon. Now he found some pocket change and rode that new bicycle 3 miles to the general store, where he phoned his mother and told her that their father was gone. "You want me to stay and help get things straightened up tomorrow?" he asked her. "No, go on to school," she said. "I'll be on the first bus." When the children stepped off the bus the next day, Emma greeted them. She had put the meat away and organised the house. She had taken care of everything and carried on without mentioning the recent chaos, as though she'd never left. She was planning to ask a judge for a peace bond, which would require PC to keep his hands off her, but she learned that he had hired a lawyer to dispute her claims. So she hired a lawyer too, and on September the 6th, 1940, at the Big Stone Courthouse in Huntington, West Virginia, Emma Gatewood, after 35 years of matrimony, filed for divorce. 5 months later, on February the 6th, 1941, Emma and her lawyer appeared before a judge and divorce commissioner. Emma testified to the discord in her marriage, to the abuse she had suffered and the ways in which she had been mistreated. After consideration, the judge issued his decree that the bond of matrimony heretofore existing between the plaintiff, Emma R. Gatewood, and the defendant, P.C. Gatewood, is hereby dissolved, and the said plaintiff is hereby granted an absolute divorce from the defendant from the bond of matrimony. He awarded Emma custody of Louise, 14, Lucy, 12, and Nelson, 16, and demanded that P.C. pay Emma $15 a month in alimony. He also awarded Emma the farm on Barker's Ridge and demanded that P.C. continue to make payments on it. If he failed to do that, he'd be called back to court. Emma wrote later that she had been happy ever since. "I know when I go to bed that no brute of a man is going to kick me out into the floor and then lie out of it," she wrote. But he wasn't done causing her grief. He would have failed to pay monthly alimony and run up a debt of $200. Then, when she threatened to sue, he'd promised to deed her the farm and give her half of what he owed. But she could deal with that. Their relationship was finally over. He would never again lay a hand on her. She crossed the Connecticut River into New Hampshire at Hanover and walked quickly through the town, hoping that no one had alerted another newspaper reporter to her presence. She was beginning to tire of the consistent delays. To make matters worse, the reporter in Rutland a few days before had somehow gotten the idea that she intended to square dance in front of the television cameras when she finished the trail, and CBS News had broadcast the error on television. She had no intention of square dancing in private, much less in front of the American television viewing public. At least it wasn't raining in Hanover. She didn't know it then, but the storm chasing Emma up the coast was causing massive devastation to the south as it slung a fine and black band of rain on New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. The storm had been nearly counted out by weathermen on Thursday. It looked like nothing more than a low-pressure system moving over New England. But it was still moving, rotating in a vast counterclockwise direction, sucking up warm and moisture-laden air from the Atlantic and pushing humidity in the northeast to sultry, almost tropical levels. Then came a high-pressure trough. Wet air rose, cooled, expanded, and began falling across the region. Diane was not dead, not yet. In the early morning hours in Waterbury, Connecticut, where Emma had stopped to visit with Mrs. Clarence Blake 2 weeks before, floodwaters from the Naugatuck River had surged 35 feet in places, topping riverbanks and washing away bridges and homes, destroying businesses and sucking families into the raging water. Parents tied their children to treetops as they prayed for rescue. In Winsted, the serene Mad River smashed through town and isolated residents from rescuers. In Farmington, a rescue boat capsized, sending little Patricia Ann Bechard to her death, and a fireman lashed little Linda Barolomeo to a tree before he was washed into floodwaters himself. In Seymour, the water unearthed caskets from a graveyard and sent them bobbing downstream. In Putnam, a magnesium plant caught fire and shot flames 250 feet in the air. Everywhere, police and firefighters were rushing from house to house, ordering residents to get out. The entire town of Ellenville, New York, population 4,000, was evacuated, but for many, the warnings came too late. The rainfall totals in Connecticut were unbelievable. 14 inches in Torrington, 13 in Winsted, 12 in Hartford, nearly 20 inches fell in Westfield, Massachusetts. The worst episode was playing out in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, near the Delaware Water Gap. The usually gentle Broadhead Creek rose 30 feet in 15 minutes, plunging into a religious retreat called Camp Davis, where the campers fled to a house on higher ground. As water rose, they climbed into the second story, then the attic, until the house gave a shudder and collapsed. One woman would recall hearing children screaming hysterically as she clung to debris. She would later learn that 31 campers were dead. Strasbourg was isolated for 10 hours. Across the region, flooding and rivers washed away 7 bridges. A fleet of helicopters rescued 235 passengers from a stranded Lackawanna railroad train in the Pocono Mountains. In nearby Milford, 2 men, tied together by ropes, found an elderly woman stranded in her apartment and carried her to safety. President Eisenhower would declare 6 eastern states disaster areas in need of federal relief. The combined death toll for both storms would climb above 200, and the damage would be estimated at well over $1.5 billion, the highest on record. But around noon on August the 20th, the rain began to subside and the rivers grudgingly receded toward normal channels. The flooding failed to spread much farther north than Northampton, Massachusetts. In Hanover, New Hampshire, where tourists had holed up in motels because routes to the south were flooded or impassable, Emma walked on through town, unaware of the death and chaos spread out behind her. She saw a couple of girls playing tennis in a park in town, and she asked them if they wanted to go on a hike. The girls didn't answer, and Emma continued down the road. 2 blocks later, she heard someone running up behind her. The girls had followed her. They wanted to know if she was the woman hiking from Georgia to Maine who they had heard about. Emma told them who she was. She asked if they knew of a place to eat outside town, but they didn't. One of the girls insisted Emma come home with her to have lunch. Emma thought the girl's mother might be upset by a surprise guest, but she followed them back to the courts anyway. The mother was somewhat taken aback, but she made the best of it and drove them all home for sandwiches. When her husband walked in the front door, he shook Emma's hand like he knew her. She didn't know why until he fetched his copy of Sports Illustrated. She had not yet seen the story, so she read it there. The man, Dr. Lord, phoned a friend who belonged to the Dartmouth Outing Club and asked if Emma could stay in one of their cabins along the trail. His friend was receptive. He said the trail was clean most of the way to the cabins and that she'd find them easily. After lunch, Dr. Lord drove Emma back to where she had left the trail. When she got to the outskirts of town, a woman and some teenagers were there, waiting to meet her. They visited for a while, and when Emma decided it was time to press on, the teenagers, 2 girls and 3 boys, rode their bikes beside her down the road for 2 miles. One of the girls insisted on carrying Emma's sack in a bike basket. Emma never found the clean trail that Dr. Lord's friend had mentioned. Instead, she hiked through weeds that stretched well above her head. When she came to a clearing, she noticed that an envelope had been pinned to a post beside the trail. Upon closer inspection, her name was written on the envelope. Inside was a note from a woman who lived in a red house just off the trail. The woman wanted to invite Emma in for tea. The invitation made her happy. She felt like a dignitary. She joined the woman for dinner. Then the woman's husband, George Bock, told Emma how to get inside the Dartmouth Outing Club cabins. She arrived before dark and got a good night's rest on a real mattress. At noon the next day, as she came to a highway, she spotted a man waiting with camera gear. "You boys always seem to find me," she said. He introduced himself as a photographer, Hanson Carroll, from the nearby Valley News. He had been trying to track her down for a few hours. He first heard she had come through Hanover that morning, so he talked to Burdett Weymouth at the Hanover information booth, who showed him where the trail went up and over Moose Mountain. Not being endowed with the same energies as Emma, Carroll drove around Moose Mountain and waited along Lyme Dorchester Road for her to come out of the woods. Within an hour, she came down the hill and into the road, tan and smiling. He asked Emma whether she would mind if he took a few photographs and filmed her hiking. She said she didn't. He took what must have been 100 feet of film, shots of Emma eating lunch by the trail sign, walking along the road with 2 little girls and a boy, walking alone. She told him she had already worn out 5 pairs of sneakers. She was wearing her 6th. They talked about all the attention she was receiving, and he asked her if it bothered her. She explained that she was not adverse to publicity as long as the reporters didn't take up too much of her time. He got the hint, but he asked her one more question. "Why are you doing this?" "Just for the heck of it," she said. Hanson Carroll's story ran in the Valley News on Monday, August the 22nd, 1955. Its place on the front page was a curious, haunting reminder of how close Emma Gatewood had been to danger. The bold headline at the top of the front page read, "Pestilence threatened as flood's toll is counted." The small headline read, "Damage thought to be more than $1 billion, 86 known dead." Below the headline was a photograph of Emma, smiling, sitting in the grass and touching a sign that said Appalachian Trail. Below the photograph was another headline, Grandma walks Appalachian Trail for the heck of it.